and the house on Stillwater Lane. It was the summer of 2002 when I first heard about the abandoned house on Stillwater Lane. Back then I was just a teenager looking for thrills in our small, uneventful town. The legends about the house were well known among the kids in my neighborhood. They said it was haunted, that anyone who dared to enter would never be the same again. One humid August night, my friends and I gathered at our usual spot by the old oak tree, daring each other to go to the house. Fueled by the confidence only teenagers have, we decided to make it an adventure. We grabbed our flashlights, our hearts racing with a mix of fear and excitement. The house loomed at the end of Stillwater Lane, surrounded by overgrown weeds and an aura of neglect. Its windows were shattered and the front door hung ajar as if inviting us in. We approached cautiously, the wooden porch creaking under our weight. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Our flashlights cast eerie shadows on the peeling wallpaper and broken furniture. The stories we had heard began to feel all too real. We moved room to room, our footsteps echoing in the silence. In the living room, we found an old photograph album on a coffee table. It was covered in grime, but the pictures inside were still visible. They showed a family, parents and 2 children, posing in front of the very house we stood in. Their smiles seemed forced, their eyes hollow. "Check this out," I said, pointing to a picture of the family gathered around a birthday cake. There was something off about their expressions, like they were aware of a sinister presence behind the camera. Suddenly we heard a faint whisper. It was unintelligible but sent chills down our spines. We huddled together, our flashlights shaking. The whisper grew louder, more insistent. It seemed to be coming from upstairs. "Let's go," my friend Mark said, his voice trembling. But curiosity got the better of us. We ascended the staircase, each step creaking ominously. At the top we found a hallway lined with closed doors. The whispering was now a low, guttural chant. It led us to a door at the end of the hall. We hesitated before opening it, our hands slick with sweat. The room inside was a child's bedroom, untouched by time. Toys lay scattered on the floor, and a small bed was neatly made. In the center of the room stood a dollhouse, an exact replica of the house we were in. We approached it cautiously, our flashlights illuminating the tiny rooms. Inside the dollhouse we saw miniature figures, a family of 4, positioned exactly as in the photographs. As we watched, the figures began to move. The parents turned to face us, their tiny eyes gleaming with malice. The children's figures twisted and contorted, their faces morphing into grotesque masks of pain. We stumbled back, our flashlights flickering. The chant grew louder, filling our heads with a nauseating dread. The room felt like it was closing in on us, the walls pulsating with an unnatural energy. "We need to get out of here," Mark shouted. We turned to flee, but the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The whispering was now a cacophony of voices, screaming in our ears. We banged on the door, but it wouldn't budge. In the midst of our panic, I glanced back at the dollhouse. The figures had vanished, replaced by a single word scrawled in blood: "Leave." With a surge of adrenaline, we forced the door open and bolted down the stairs, not daring to look back. We burst out of the house and ran until we reached the safety of the streetlights. Breathless and shaken, we vowed never to speak of what we had seen. But the experience haunted us. The whispers followed us in our dreams, the faces of the family etched into our memories. The house on Stillwater Lane remained a dark, festering wound in our minds. a reminder that some doors should never be opened, and some secrets are better left buried. The disappearing door. In the early 2000s, my friends and I were obsessed with urban legends and ghost stories. We would spend hours surfing the internet, looking for the creepiest tales we could find. One night, we stumbled upon a forum post that talked about the disappearing door. It was a story about a mysterious door that would appear in random places, seemingly out of nowhere. The post warned that anyone who went through the door was never seen again. The story stuck with us, and we started joking about finding the door ourselves. We even made up rules. If you saw the door, you had to knock 3 times before entering. It was all in good fun until one night when we were hanging out in the basement of my friend Mike's house. Mike's basement was huge and cluttered with old furniture and boxes. We were messing around trying to scare each other when suddenly we saw it. In the corner of the basement behind an old bookshelf was a door we had never noticed before. It was old and wooden, with a rusty handle and strange carvings. We stared at the door, our laughter dying down as a chill ran through the room. Mike, always the bravest, walked up to it. "It's just an old door," he said, but his voice wavered. He knocked 3 times just like we had joked about. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, narrow hallway. Without thinking, Mike stepped through. We called after him, but he didn't respond. The door slammed shut behind him, and no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't open it again. Panicked, we ran upstairs to tell Mike's parents. They searched the basement and the whole house, but there was no sign of the door or Mike. The police were called, but they couldn't find anything either. It was as if the door had never existed. Days turned into weeks, and Mike was still missing. His parents were devastated, and we were haunted by guilt. We kept searching the basement, hoping the door would reappear, but it never did. Years later, I moved away and tried to forget about that night. But sometimes, when I'm alone in a quiet room, I hear a faint knocking. 3 knocks, slow and deliberate. And I know, somewhere out there, the door is still waiting. The forgotten website. It was the early 2000s, a time when the internet was still a mysterious and wild frontier. Among the many forums, chat rooms, and personal blogs, there was one website that few people knew about, and even fewer spoke of: the forgotten website. Nobody knew who created it or when it first appeared. Its URL was a string of random numbers and letters, something you could only stumble upon by accident or through whispered recommendations in the darkest corners of the web. The site's design was crude, with a black background and neon green text, reminiscent of the early days of HTML. The homepage featured a simple message: "Enter at your own risk." Below it was a single hyperlink labeled "Proceed." Curious and fearless, I clicked it. The next page loaded slowly, revealing a collection of bizarre and unsettling images: distorted faces, abandoned buildings, and cryptic symbols. Each image had a clickable link that led to a short, eerie story. They were tales of missing people, haunted places, and inexplicable phenomena. The stories were written in a style that made them feel like urban legends, but there was something disturbingly realistic about them. As I navigated through the site, I came across a story about a man named Daniel. The tale described how Daniel had found the website just like I had and became obsessed with it. He spent hours every night exploring its dark content, until one day he disappeared without a trace. His last known online activity was visiting a page called The Final Link. My heart pounded as I found The Final Link at the bottom of the page. Ignoring the growing sense of dread, I clicked on it. The screen went black and a low, droning sound emanated from my speakers. Words slowly faded into view. "You have been chosen." The site then displayed a live feed from what appeared to be a webcam. The footage was grainy and dark, but I could make out a dimly lit room. In the center of the room was a computer, and sitting at the desk was a figure, hunched over the keyboard. As the camera zoomed in, my blood ran cold. The person at the desk was me. I stared at my screen, paralyzed with fear. How was this possible? I tried to close the browser, but my mouse wouldn't move. The figure on the screen lifted its head, and I saw my own terrified face staring back at me. Suddenly the screen flickered, and the room behind the figure started to distort. Shadows moved independently of any light source, and the walls seemed to pulse as if they were alive. The sound of static grew louder, mingling with faint whispers that were impossible to decipher. Then, the figure on the screen stood up and walked towards the camera. I felt an icy chill as it reached out, and the screen went black again. I was left staring at my reflection on the dark monitor. A new message appeared. "You are part of the website now." Panicking, I yanked the power cord from the wall, plunging my room into silence and darkness. I sat there, trembling, afraid to move. The next day I tried to find the website again, but it was gone. I searched for hours, but the URL was no longer valid, and no trace of it remained in my browsing history. I thought it was over. Just a freak occurrence. A bad dream. But at night I still hear the whispers, growing louder, calling me back to the forgotten corners of the internet. And every time I look into a mirror, I see that dimly lit room behind me, waiting for me to return. I am afraid that one day I won't be able to resist